I'd like to start off by saying, never trust anything but the 100% name brand official seller. I learned this lesson the hard way, a way that no one should ever have to endure. Let me tell you the story. It was a nice day, no rain or snow or anything of that nature. It was midsummer and it was showing, with temperatures in the mid-90s. Being the 14-year-old kid that I was into what everybody was referring to the electronic age. I had no cell phone, no 52-inch plasma HD TV, and the only thing I was lucky enough to eventually save up enough money for was a PS3. The only reason I chose the PS3 was because it provided a free online service. Money wasn't something I could be throwing away like it was nothing. Another thing I should add is that I was incredibly tech savvy. I was fluent in computer coding, building and restorations of computers and technology such as iPods and iPhones, Nintendo DS, etc. I was always looking for new projects, and I had even advertised myself before as being a technology repairman. It came to me as no surprise whenever I'd have friends come up to me with their broken cell phones or 3DS and ask me to fix them. I was happy with what I did. It was how I saved money, and I liked my job, so to speak. Like they say, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. So I continued on doing what I did. It wasn't until I came across the one object that scarred me for life that I never wanted to touch a piece of technology again. God have mercy on your soul, should you ever come into contact with what I did. And the only reason I found this item was because of what I was doing. I not only fixed things for other people, I fixed damaged things people were selling for pennies on the dollar and kept them for myself. A wise investment which saved me literally hundreds if I got the right deals. So, when I saw a 2G iPod Touch on eBay claiming minor damage such as a broken LCD and needing a new battery, it wasn't anything new for me to pay the $20 they were asking for. It wasn't until I started tinkering with it that I knew just what I had gotten myself into. I was a very impatient kid. I hated waiting, and if I could find any way that I could get my hands on something quickly, I'd do it. So I paid for express shipping, and what do you know? I got it in 2 days. That's it, just 2 days. I planned ahead and express ordered a new LCD screen and battery off of Amazon. The total project was $50 with all new parts in it. So I didn't mind because it saved me about, I don't know, 150 bucks. First things first. I got out my toolkit, popped off the broken LCD, replaced it in a snap, put the new battery in less than 20 minutes, I had myself an almost brand new iPod. Curious as all hell, I decided to see what the guy selling it on eBay had put on the iPod. Grave mistake. The biggest pain was connecting the iPod to iTunes to turn the iPod back on. So I dug through my cable box, doing numerous jobs can get you a nice little box of handy cables, and pulled out a 30-pin connector. I plugged the USB end into my computer and the other end into my iPod and hooked it up. The guy had named it Jared. Nothing too skeptical, it was probably just the name of the guy who had sold the iPod. I let iTunes do its thing, and it didn't take long before my iPod was fully functional again. I almost panicked when it hit the unlock screen, but for some reason, there was no passcode lock on it. Lucky for me, he had a black lock screen background and a pentagram drawn in what looked like blood for the icon background. It's pretty creepy. That turned out to be the least of my worries. The iPod had been jailbroken, so it came as no surprise when I saw numerous apps that were, well, illegal, to say the least. He had put a specific code lock on one folder on the iPod. It had one app in it that I couldn't make out the picture to, so with it being in the folder was titled Stowaway. Puzzled and already creeped out by the unnerving background of my iPod, I decided to look through the documents he had stored on it before I completely wiped this thing's memory. He had one app from Cydia that allowed you to delve into the iPod's hard drive and mess with the actual files in it. You know, iFile. I shoved it off until later and headed for his photos/videos. There were approximately 12 photos and 2 videos. Every picture in both videos were of the exact same thing. It was a little girl, probably about 8 years old in age. The pictures were heartless, gut-wrenching, and downright awful. The first picture and all the way through to the last picture showed her being dismembered piece by piece. The first photo showed her fingers cut off, then her toes, feet, hands, arms, and legs. The last photo was a picture of her head, viciously cut into it that I couldn't even make out, even after studying for a good 5 minutes. I was at the verge of puking and just throwing this thing away when I remembered the 2 videos. Seeing the girl and seeing the pictures in the thumbnails, I had a pretty good feeling of what was in those 2 videos. Taking a deep breath and after getting a glass of water, I started the video on a low volume. It began with the same girl as before, unharmed and looking pretty as a doll. Her face went from a slight smile to an unnerving glare as she slowly began to sit down. She sat cross-legged, leaning her head back and stretching her arms out, saying the one thing I will never forget to this day in an almost staticky, growling voice. Gloria Satanis, et Beal, et Spiritue Maloso. The video ended with her arms bleeding, razor-like cuts running down them and down her sides. I was terrified at this point. I had just witnessed a girl practically be taken over by Satan. I had to see the second video, though. I had to. Summoning my courage, I selected the second video with a grimace. The clip started with her body in a pentagram. There was a man in the video this time, and the point of view was overhead so that you could see everything happening. It finally came together in my head. This was a satanic sacrificing. I wasn't very familiar with satanic rituals, but I knew the gist of them. The photos were basically stills of what happened during the second video. He spoke softly in Latin, his voice peaking on certain tones when he'd say something as he worked. He cut her fingers off in a rather gruesome way, blood splattering on the ground and on him, as he used a meat cleaver on the point where the finger and palm met. He did it to each and every one of her fingers, then to each of her toes. He cut off her hands and feet in the same manner. He then took it down a more gruesome path that I had a hard time watching and comprehending. I was also extremely surprised at how well the girl took it. She didn't squirm or anything. He removed her arms and legs in a truly satanic way. He took a scalpel and tore down into the flesh, cutting all the way down until he hit the bone. Then he would simply run the knife from the shoulder all the way down to the point where her hand was cut off, and gave his best attempt at removing the flesh and muscle just to leave the bone. He did it to all 4 of her appendages. Blood everywhere at this point. She was well beyond the point of death, and her body was no more than a sacrifice to Satan. He cut down her midsection, starting at her chest and ending at her crotch, peeling open the newly formed flaps to reveal her innards. He removed the stomach, liver, intestines, and pancreas. Setting them aside in a pan, he continued on with his hellish work. He took a black marker, drew a line running across her neck, and picked up a wood-cutting axe. Tilting her head back to reveal her throat, he gave a few test swings, grazing her throat, and then with a grunt swung the axe down precisely on the line, decapitating her. The sound was indescribably horrifying and sickening. It was like the sound of an animal being run over. You can hear the sounds of every bone crushing and the muscle tearing. It was a guttural sound, and it was nothing short of a literal bloodbath. She had lost most of the blood in her body from the muscle tissue removal during the attack on her arms and legs, but she still managed to spurt a decent amount of blood from the stump where her head used to be. He tossed the lifeless midsection away and held up the decapitated head to the camera, shouting Lucifer's prayer in Latin. I was done at this point. I closed the video, deleted the 12 pictures and the 2 videos, went into iFile and deleted every trace of that stuff from my iPod, and shuddered. It wasn't until I looked closer at the icon background that I noticed it was the girl being sacrificed. I attempted to change it, believe me, I tried. I deleted every single godforsaken file using iFile, loaded it onto iTunes, and even factory restored it. But it was almost like the background had been physically glued to the screen. At this point, I said just forget it. I didn't even bother with salvaging the parts and got rid of that thing. I did the traditional way of getting rid of anything I needed to get rid of. I took it apart piece by piece and burned it. No, I didn't burn the battery, but I sure wasn't going to keep it. After knowing that it was in contact with whatever it was inside that iPod that was unholy as Lucifer himself, I burned what I could to ash and smithereens, disposing of the metal casing in the garbage. The battery was properly disposed of, but the memories still remained. I thought I had gotten rid of that thing. I hoped that it was gone. I burned it, and it had it industrially crushed, but that didn't change the fact that I had connected the thing to my computer. Guess what my PC background is now?